It is the hour before the world hears the name. I am standing just behind the velvet curtain that separates the sacred from the stage. The bells of St. Peter's Basilica are already chiming above us, echoing across the square like the voice of history itself. Below, the plaza is not full, it is overflowing. Faces of every language, every color, every age. Some are sobbing. Some laughing. Some simply staring upward, breath held in reverence. I can hear the murmurs rise and fall like waves. Who is it? Is it true? An American? And I stand here with the weight of centuries in my chest. They say the announcement is just ritual. A line in Latin. A protocol. But it never feels that way. In this moment, the whole world turns to listen to a voice they don't know, to hear a name they have not imagined. When I step forward, I do not speak only as Dominique Mamberti, prefect of the Supreme Tribunal of the Apostolic Signatura. I speak as the throat of the Church itself, old as Peter, bruised as history, and still, somehow, breathing. Behind me, in the room where popes weep, the newly elected pontiff prays. Or perhaps he doesn't. Perhaps he is staring into the mirror. Or holding a photo. Or trembling. I do not know. I only know that he asked me, quietly, with eyes that did not seek power, to speak his name. For clarity, he said. And because you have seen the Church at its most honest. I nodded. But there was more. He knew I had doubts. Not of him, but of this moment. The curtain stirs beside me. The crowd roars as if it senses breath. The Swiss guards stand ready. The master of ceremonies touches my shoulder. It is time. I step forward. Into the Roman light. The world stills. A sea of phones rises, but I do not speak to them. I speak to the child on a Manila balcony holding his grandmother's rosary. To the nun praying alone in a Chicago hospital. To the old priest weeping in a Kansas rectory. To the refugee mother in South Sudan who will hear this name on a scratchy AM radio tomorrow. I speak to the trembling heart of the Church. I look at the sky, then at the sea of faces. And I say, Annuntio vobis gaudium magnum. A murmur. Habemus papam. The sound that follows is not sound, it is wind, breath, rustling, the shifting of expectation and disbelief. The entire square leans forward, waiting. I pause. And then I speak the name. A name never spoken from this balcony before. Eminentissimum AC Reverendissimum Dominum, Dominum Robertum Franciscum Prevost. There is an intake of breath, not just in the square but across the globe. I finish the sentence, Qui sibi nomen imposit Franciscum secundum. Francis II. A cry erupts. A roar. Then silence again, stunned, unsure. And in the quiet, something else rises, wonder. An American. From Chicago. A name with both history and humility. I step back. And wait. Soon, the man in white will emerge. But for this one moment, the name alone must speak. And beneath it, the weight of a church beginning again. When the smoke rose, the city held its breath. The white plume curled above the Sistine Chapel like a dove finding its wings. It was unmistakable, pure, brilliant, full of ancient symbolism and modern suspense. Cameras turned. Reporters gasped. Children cheered before they understood why. Inside the chapel, we sat still. No words. No applause. Just silence thick with awe. There is always a moment, right after the election, when no one speaks, not because there's nothing to say, but because we all feel it. A moment older than us. Deeper than democracy. This wasn't a vote. It was something else. Something the Spirit moved through despite us. I turned to my left and saw tears on the face of a cardinal from Côte d'Ivoire. He was clutching his pectoral cross, lips quivering. To my right, a German cardinal stared straight ahead, his expression unreadable, as if still caught between theology and mystery. And then there was him. Robert Francis Prevost. He did not smile. He simply bowed his head. A long, reverent gesture, as if the weight had landed all at once. His face was calm but not composed. There was no attempt to perform holiness. Only a quiet man who had once taken vows of poverty in Peru now asked to wear white in the shadow of Peter. He knelt before the altar. And as the cardinals stood, one by one to pledge obedience, I watched his hands tremble slightly. That's when I knew this was real. Not strategy. Not ambition fulfilled. But calling. When the dean approached him with the question all new popes must answer, "By what name shall you be called?" He paused. And he said, Franciscus II. A quiet passed through the room again. Some were moved, others stunned. But no one could ignore the gravity of it. The man from Chicago had invoked the man from Buenos Aires. A bridge had been built, from the past to the present, from Latin America to North America. From one Francis to another. When the white smoke rose, many assumed the next pope would reflect Europe again. Or perhaps Africa. Perhaps Asia. But not America. Not the United States. It was too large. Too political. Too complicated. And yet here we were. A pope born under stars and stripes. But kneeling now under Michelangelo's ceiling, asking not to lead but to love. There are questions that linger long after the smoke clears. What does it mean? What happens now? Can a pope born of the New World speak to the wounds of the old? For the first time in history, the answer to who is the pope is an American. And that word American carries more than a passport. It carries centuries of contradiction. It carries gospel tents and Wall Street, gospel choirs and Guantanamo, Silicon Valley and gun violence, space exploration and spiritual hunger. It carries both freedom and forgetting. When the announcement echoed across the square, I heard it, the uncertainty, the murmurs, even the subtle tightening of shoulders among my brothers in red. An American. The question wasn't political. It was spiritual. For many in the Curia, America represents ambition, volume, complication. A place where power talks louder than prayer. A place of confidence, sometimes mistaken for arrogance. A place of division wrapped in liberty. And yet it is also a land of saints. Of Dorothy Day and Thomas Merton. Of missioners who died in jungles and sisters who marched with civil rights leaders. Of poor dioceses who feed thousands with less than nothing. Of native Catholics who kept the faith in the silence of reservations. America is many things. Perhaps too many things. But now one of its sons wears white. And so the question rises, can he leave his country behind, while still bringing its soul forward? The Church is universal. But the papacy is personal. The accent, the posture, the instinct of a pope cannot be erased. They echo in his choices, his gestures, his silences. Some fear a shift. That the papacy will become politicized. That the American lens will shape doctrine, warp perspective. But I remember the look on his face. There was no politics in it. Only awe. Only trembling. And perhaps that is the answer to the American question. This pope does not come to speak for a country. He comes to speak to its conscience. And to the world's. He was never the obvious one. Even among us, he was known more for presence than profile. There were no grand speeches. No dramatic gestures. When he entered a room, he did not command it, he calmed it. Robert Francis Prevost was born in Chicago, but he became a priest in Peru. And in many ways, that paradox shaped him, American by birth, Latin by heartbeat. His calling did not emerge in cathedrals, but in barrios. He learned to preach in Spanish before he was ever known in English-speaking Rome. He lived among the poor not for headlines, but because he had nowhere else he wanted to be. When others climbed, he descended. When others built platforms, he built trust. As an Augustinian, he took vows that bound him not to power but to simplicity. His cassock was always a little frayed. His shoes, dusted with roads walked, not carpets graced. He buried children. He baptized murderers. He sat in kitchens where mothers prayed for sons who would never come home. He knew the smell of poverty. He knew the weight of silence. He knew how to look someone in the eye and listen. And still, he never imagined this. When he was brought to Rome to oversee bishops, many thought it was a courtesy, a nod to his pastoral record. But the Spirit had other plans. It was in those Vatican corridors, long and cold, that his quiet began to speak louder than ambition ever could. He listened to victims. He spoke truth with tenderness. And when questioned in synods, he did not defend his position, he clarified his heart. So who is Robert Francis Prevost? He is a man who prays with both hands open. A man who sees no contradiction in holding a rosary and feeding the hungry. A man who never asked to be pope. And precisely because of that, became one. Rome is a city that remembers everything. It remembers emperors and martyrs, heresies and hymns. It remembers popes crowned in gold and popes buried in silence. It carries history in its stone and suspicion in its whispers. And when Robert Francis Prevost was elected, Rome reacted, not with applause but with a pause. A long, thoughtful pause. Some within the Curia were silent out of reverence, others out of calculation, and a few I could see out of quiet fear. Not fear of the man, but of the unfamiliar. An American? Some asked it under their breath as if it were a test. Others said it louder, with brows furrowed. There had been no pope from the United States in 2,000 years. And now the fisherman's shoes were to be worn by someone raised near Lake Michigan? The questions came quickly. Would he be a reformer? Would he shift doctrine? Would he speak too quickly or not at all? Within the halls of the Vatican, these questions matter, because the papacy is not only theology. It is temperature. It sets the mood, the tone. It tells the world what the Church dreams of becoming. And this new pope, he was hard to read. He smiled, yes, but gently. He spoke, but only when necessary. He consulted the staff not about logistics, but about names, who among the homeless had come that week for shelter. What time the Vatican pharmacy opened for the elderly. How many confessionals were being used on weekends. He was not building a policy. He was learning their names. That unsettled some. Others were moved. In San Damaso courtyard I overheard a Monsignor say, "He walks like a man who's been barefoot." Another whispered, "He looks like he's still listening for someone before he speaks." But the most telling reaction came from an old Swiss guard who'd been posted for nearly 3 decades. He said simply, he bowed lower than any I've seen before. That's what Rome noticed first. Not the accent, not the nationality, but the humility. And in that humility, the eternal city began to hope again. This is not just the story of a man in white. This is the story of a church learning to speak with a new accent, not just of language but of heart. The spiritual meaning of electing an American as pope is not about power shifting westward. It is not about modernizing faith or exporting influence. No, it is about something far more mysterious, a church learning to kneel in the language of contradiction. America, after all, is a mirror of the world, divided yet dreaming, wounded yet loud, blessed yet restless. It is a land where billionaires walk past beggars and churches thrive beside violence. It is both mission territory and empire, both Bethlehem and Babylon. And now the man who will shepherd the body of Christ across the globe has emerged from that paradox. What does this mean? It means God still chooses from Nazareth, from places we do not expect, from accents we do not trust, from nations we fear are too proud to bow. It means the gospel is not chained to a continent. It means humility is not bound to geography. It means that perhaps the most divided land on earth was entrusted with unity, not to claim it but to seek it. Because Prevost is not just an American. He is the son of immigrants, the brother of the poor, the student of the South. He is a reminder that the church must speak to all nations, not as ruler but as reconciler. That white smoke is not about victory. It is about surrender. And that robe is not armor, it is linen for washing feet. In Robert Francis Prevost, the Spirit did not choose America. It chose someone who could show America what it still needs to learn, that greatness begins in humility. And holiness always starts with listening.